Hi all, welcome to the Marquee Matchups. For this week we have the UCL Marquee Matchups for Tuesday and Wednesday night's games, and then we have the normal Marquee Matchups that would drop on a Thursday. So hopefully you find this useful. Apologies for this being a bit later than usual, but if you can smash links, always much appreciated. Sub to the channel if you're new. Follow me on Twitter, G is a legend. All the links are down below for posts and channel and social media links as always. And hopefully we can kind of nail them down. Remember, we be potentially prepared with UCL cards in general, commons and rares, and then also when it comes to usual buying of like 75 to 81s for like UCL. But anyways, we have quite a few games to cover. Wednesday only had 3 games that could happen because obviously you can't really see any of the teams that have already featured, like Ajax, PSG, Manchester United or Liverpool. So the ones that stand out are Lokomotiv versus Bayern, Shakhtar versus Inter, Mönchengladbach versus Real Madrid, Marseille v Manchester City, Sevilla versus Rennes, Juventus versus Barcelona, and Bruges versus Lazio. Most likely of the 7, I would say, is Juventus versus Barcelona. Pretty much because it's 2 of the biggest teams in the world. If I was to say a second game, I would probably lean towards Marseille and Manchester City, and then if I was to go from there, I'd go Mönchengladbach, Real Madrid, and then Sevilla versus Rennes. However, they do have a history of taking Bruges and sometimes with who they play, so don't be surprised with that. But as I say, Juventus Barca is my main shout, Marseille Man City being my second one, and then my 2 alternatives I would go for is Mönchengladbach, Real Madrid, and Sevilla versus Rennes. Now, how would you fundamentally prepare for this? Juventus obviously have lost quite a few players that like Rugani for example. You're not realistically going to look at Ramsey. You may look at Khedira because he's 81 rated and good nation. You could look at you've just got to be wise because there's not really as many players as they used to have. Barcelona, you'd be looking at Dest. He'll be very, very common. Ansu Fati will be another. You might find that Barcelona prove the more useful of the 2, simply because they have like more lower rated options to kind of work through, simply because of what they have at their like disposal like currently. And also when you think about Juventus and Barcelona, we've been kind of doing a few transfers between each other, like Pjanic and Arthur for example, but obviously you're never going to need them. But Braithwaite is obviously like another that springs to like mind that you can buy for this, and plus they're rares, so it's like it helps your cause. But it would be like Bentancur, Dira, McKennie realistically for Juventus. With Marseille Man City, you would generally look around like Strootman and like the other lower rated options within the league because they have quite a good abundance to work with. Sakai and like Kamara, Kalita Kar, Man City, you'd look at like Foden, Zinchenko. Who else would you realistic? Like Zach Steffen is another that springs to mind. As long as you're prepared between non-rares and the rares, like Sanson, Rongier, Benedetto, like you'll be able to get like the rares and non-rares as well. So like as long as you're buying, like as long as you own 2 or 3 of each team, you can readily buy them for 350 or 650 for their base cards. For like the rares, like UCL based like UCL cards, they're a little bit more harder to come by, simply just because of obviously people are preparing, and realistically for the rares just now you're paying roughly about 1500 coins, so keep that in mind. And like the commons are about usually around about 1000 to 1200 usually, but because you usually need more and the supply is a bit less, I've noticed that because of like how things are playing out just now, that these are actually a lot more inflated than they should be. Like even though I've seen 1.2, 1.4k for some, like for at times I've seen them go to 2.5k just now. So it's like be wary when you're buying and who you're buying as well. But it's mainly the rares, but because I think the rares just now are cheaper than the non-rares, it's definitely worth keeping in mind. But as I say, as long as you cover the league, the national and nation and rarity you can go the 82s if you can get them for 700, but only if you realistically get them for 7, and they're going to sell for double or treble if they're part of that team, because that's what you don't want to be overspending if you don't need to, basically. For normal marquee matchups for this week, we have a number of games. We have 6 that stand out. The only real other ones that stood out were like Manchester United, Arsenal, but I thought we've been sick to death with Manchester United. It's like EPL, they kind of knockout silly. I pondered Lille versus Lyon if I wanted to maybe go like Ligue 1 or even Nantes versus Paris Saint-Germain, but I feel Celtic versus Aberdeen Scottish Cup, because that's a semi-final that was rescheduled due to the coronavirus, so it was meant to be played in like March but didn't happen. You've got Jiangsu Suning versus Shanghai SIPG, which is like a championship playoff. I think whoever wins this is like the semis, so it's like whoever wins this was potentially going through to the final. It is 2 legs though, so keep that in mind. Sampdoria versus Genoa, one of the main Italian derbies. Then Dallas versus Houston Dynamo, that is basically a Texas derby, because Dallas is in Texas and so is Houston, so that's why that is in. Maritimo versus Nacional is the Madeira derby, and then Al Ittihad versus Al Ahly is the Jeddah derby. So realistically, when you look at this, you've got 2 kind of big leagues, Italy and Portugal, and 2 smaller leagues easily between like MLS, Saudi, SPFL. I know we've just had Scottish Premiership, so keep that in mind as well. But I would realistically say that you're probably looking maybe say MLS, Portugal, China and Italy, but I wouldn't be surprised if Saudi was to sneak it. But I feel these are the 6 that's most resolute, and usual buying is silvers for Celtic, Aberdeen, MLS, Saudi, Chinese Super League. Then like Sampdoria, Genoa is when you add in, and same for Maritimo Nacional where you can as well, is look at the golds. We've seen so far that they're not very high rated, like the highest is like what 77, 78 rated, so it's not been too hard. As usual, 2 or 3 of each team. Like as we always say, when it's a gold rated squad, if they're making anything over 75, you just generally try and aim for anyone that is 75 rated, generally like 75, 76 rated. Get in, and like the reason why 75 as well, you can buy them at 300, it's no risk and it's quite stress free, especially when you're buying up the league. It makes your job so much easier, and especially if that particular player, whether it be for the league or the team, is suddenly got 1,000 coins or 1,200 coins, whatever it may be, up or down. Well, it's not going to go down, but in that say 8 to 1,200 range, you're laughing. It's easy profit. You're not risking anything. And the silver, if you're able to get them for 150 across the leagues, because people will be preparing still for on the assumption of league SBCs. The reason why we say silver is because the bronzes haven't really been required too much, but it still never hurts, because you can still throw in bronzes into certain parts of the routes. They might say minimum six silvers, and it might mean you can get away with 5 bronzes. It makes a big difference, and if you're able to just put it towards the league, saves you a lot of stress and a lot of hassle. And if you can add in, because they're sometimes only asking for a couple of rares, sometimes maybe making the bronzes being the rares is a bit more convenient, because the silver rares are usually around 250, 300, whereas a bronze rare will just stay at 150. So that's something to factor in as well. Just make, at the end of the day, you're trying to factor in, if you're having to buy stuff, you're trying to minimise your spend and then hopefully potentially maximising your return. Always, if you're preparing for this, maybe selling the hype. If there's anything going up, then maybe what to get out. If not, and you're willing to just take the risk, then more than welcome, as long as you're not endangering too much of your coins. But as we said, marquee matchups not as profitable as used to be, especially with how the routes are just now. But see how the marquee matchups for both play out this week. So expect Tuesday 6 PM for UCL, Thursday 6 PM for the normal. Let me know, as I said, in the comments down below, who you think will feature in the marquee matchups. Smash likes always, sub to the channel if you're new, follow me on Twitter, GSLegend, and I will catch you all later.